Ever get that feeling? Being surrounded by people, maybe even friends, family, whoever, but you still feel kind of alone.
Oh, absolutely. Like you're in a crowded room, but you're on a different wavelength.
Exactly. Like you're speaking a different language and nobody really gets you. And that's what this Simon Sinek interview got me thinking about.
Oh, yeah. What resonated with you there?
Well, he's this big leadership guy, right? Writes all those books, gives those inspiring talks.
Right.
But even HE talks about feeling lonely sometimes. It just made me realize maybe it's way more common than we think.
It is. And that's what's so powerful about Sinek's honesty in this interview, right? He doesn't try to pretend he's got it all figured out.
No, not at all. He actually embraces the vulnerability.
Totally. Instead of this picture-perfect image of success, he's like, hey, I wrestle with loneliness too.
And it's so refreshing because it reminds us that no matter who you are, what you've achieved, we're all human dealing with these same universal experiences.
100%.
And he doesn't just mention it in passing either. He goes deep on how he's been told he's hard to read.
Interesting.
Which really got me thinking, because it turns out this can be linked to his ADHD.
Oh, right.
And how some people with ADHD might seem like they're stonewalling in conversations.
Unintentionally, though.
Exactly. It's not that they're not interested, it's just their brains process things differently.
Like a different operating system almost?
Yes. Have you ever experienced that where someone misinterprets your silence?
All the time, especially like in those moments where you're just processing information internally.
Yeah.
And people take it personally, but you're like, no, I'm just thinking.
Exactly. And it makes you realize how important clear communication is, especially in close relationships, which Sinek talks about.
Oh, definitely. He's big on that direct, open communication.
He even asks those questions that some people might think are a little too direct, just to make sure everyone's on the same page.
He gives that great example, right, about asking his friend, why do you charge that?
I know. I laughed out loud when I heard that because most people would never dream of saying that.
Way too afraid of being awkward.
But Sinek, he just goes for it because he genuinely thought her prices were too low.
See, I admire that. It's that refreshing honesty, gets to the heart of the matter.
It does. And it shows how crucial it is to understand different communication styles.
Absolutely. Because what might seem abrupt to one person could be completely coming from a good place with someone else.
It's about recognizing those nuances and bridging that gap, which I think is so important.
Communication is everything.
It really is. And here's where it gets really interesting. Sinek doesn't even like the term mental health.
Oh, tell me you're about to say mental fitness.
Mental fitness, yes.
It's such a game changer, that little shift in language.
It totally is. It's like instead of this abstract idea, he compares it to physical fitness.
Which just makes so much more sense.
It does. You have good days, you have off days, but it's about that consistent effort over time. I don't know about you, but I've always struggled with that pressure to be okay all the time.
Oh, constantly. It's exhausting.
And Sinek's whole mental fitness thing, it just takes the pressure off.
It does. It reframes the entire conversation. It's not about this perfect state of mental health that feels impossible to reach.
It's acknowledging that fluctuations are normal.
We all have days where we're in a slump, we feel lonely, or we're just not at our best.
It's part of being human. We're not robots. And this is where his no crying alone rule with his friends really hit home for me.
Oh, I love that he talks about this. Tell me more about that. What resonated?
It's like he's built this whole philosophy around it, like that saying, the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others.
Right. And the thing is, he actually walks the walk. He doesn't just talk about service in some abstract way. He brings it down to earth, even connecting it to, like, romantic relationships.
Yeah, how so?
So he talks about how even in a partnership, there's this give and take of serving the other person. Not about keeping score or anything, but just creating this dynamic where both people feel appreciated,
I love that.
It really made me think about all the little things day to day that we can do to serve the people we love.
It's true. It doesn't have to be some grand gesture. Sometimes it's those everyday things that mean the most.
100%. Like just, I don't know, making someone coffee in the morning or putting your phone down and really listening when they need to talk.
Being present.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And speaking of relationships, Sinek actually gets really candid about his own dating life in this interview.
How does he?
He does. He talks about this 3+1 concept that he has for what makes a relationship work, but it's not just a checklist, you know?
Okay, so what are the 3+1?
So he says you need intellectual compatibility,
Okay.
emotional compatibility,
Makes sense.
physical compatibility,
Right.
and day circumstance.
Circum.
Yeah, like all those external factors.
Yeah.
And he emphasizes that all of these things have to work together in this kind of dynamic way.
Interesting. And he's open about the fact that he's had his own struggles in relationships too, right?
Oh, yeah. He talks about how his communication style, which, you know, can be pretty direct,
Right.
has sometimes been a challenge in his past relationships. But the thing is, he owns it.
That's huge.
He's actively trying to improve his self-awareness and how he communicates.
It takes courage to do that, to own your part, even when it's tough.
It really does. And you know what else? He even talks about getting feedback from exes.
Whoa, seriously?
Not in a bitter or resentful way, but as a way to learn and grow. Like, hey, what was my role in this? What can I do better next time?
Wow.
Talk about commitment to personal growth. And it actually goes back to what we were talking about earlier, about how even those so-called failed relationships,
They teach us so much.
exactly, they offer valuable lessons. And it's all about being open to feedback, even when it's hard to hear, because those difficult conversations, they're often the ones that help us grow the most. He also talks about how technology has kind of changed the dating game.
It's true. It's a whole different world now with dating apps and everything.
It really is. He makes this observation about how easy it is to get caught up in that swipe left, swipe right mentality. But does that really lead to building the kind of deep, meaningful connections that we crave?
That's the question, isn't it? Like, on one hand, technology gives you access to so many more people, more possibilities. But on the other hand, it's easy to fall into that trap of thinking the grass is always greener.
Oh, for sure. And then there's this pressure to keep up appearances online, which plays into what Sinek says about the quarter-life crisis.
Oh yeah, what does he say about that?
He sees so many young people feeling this intense pressure to achieve certain milestones by a certain age. Like there's this invisible timetable, and if you're not hitting those markers...
Right, like everyone's supposed to have the dream job, the perfect relationship, the Instagram-worthy life by 30.
Exactly. And it's all amplified by social media, where everyone's curating their highlight reel.
It's so easy to get caught in that comparison game. So what's Sinek's advice? How do we deal with that pressure?
He's like, tune out the noise, forget about those arbitrary timelines, and focus on your own path.
Easier said than done sometimes.
It is. But he's right. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to life. What matters most is identifying your own values and passions, and then having the courage to pursue them, even if it means going against the grain.
Love that.
He actually uses his own career trajectory as an example. He didn't find mainstream success until his late 30s.
Is that right?
And he's very open about the fact that it was a winding road.
I bet.
He talks about setbacks, self-doubt, moments where he questioned everything. But it was his willingness to embrace those challenges, learn from them, and stay true to his vision even when people doubted him that ultimately led him to where he is today.
That's what's so inspiring though, right? It's not about this linear path to success. It's about the journey, the growth, the resilience.
Absolutely. And realizing that some of our greatest contributions come from those moments where we have to dig deep and push ourselves further. He uses this really cool analogy to explain it, actually. He compares his work to an iceberg.
An iceberg. I like that.
So the tip of the iceberg, that's what everyone sees, right? The books, the talks, the workshops, all that.
Right.
But beneath the surface, that's where the real magic is, this much larger vision he has for the world.
And what's that vision?
He talks about a world where people feel inspired by their work, safe in their communities, fulfilled in their lives. It's about something much bigger than just himself.
It's like that drive to make a difference, to leave the world better than you found it.
Exactly. It's not about reaching some finite endpoint, you know? It's about this ongoing journey of pushing himself further, challenging the status quo, inspiring others to join him in creating a better world.
And I love that. It's not about perfection, it's about progress.
100%. And it's something we can all connect with. Because I think all of us on some level long to be a part of something bigger than ourselves.
We do. We really do. And you know, it's funny. It's like sometimes even the smallest actions can have the biggest ripple effect.
Oh, absolutely. Like, remember what sparked that aha moment for Sinek in Afghanistan? It wasn't some grand gesture. It was that simple desire to just make himself useful. to contribute to the well-being of those around him, however he could.
Just show up.
Exactly.
And honestly, sometimes just being present for someone is the most powerful thing you can do.
It really is. It's about lending that listening ear, offering a helping hand, letting someone know they're not alone in their struggles.
And recognizing that we all have those struggles, right? No matter who we are or what we've achieved.
It's true. And speaking of that, I love how Sinek is so open about the fact that he's still working on himself, too.
Oh, yeah. How so?
He talks about how he's gotten better at recognizing how his ADHD sometimes shows up in his relationships, but he's still learning, still making adjustments.
It's a constant evolution.
Exactly. He even talks about how he and his partner are actively working together to create a more supportive dynamic. And I think that's such an important message because it reminds us that relationships take work.
They do. And they're not always pretty.
They're not. And it's okay to ask for help when you need it.
It really is. It's like Sinek saying, hey, I'm this successful guy, but I don't have all the answers. I'm still figuring things out as I go.
And that makes him so much more relatable, you know, in a world where we often feel pressure to present this perfect image.
Right. Like social media just amplifies that.
Totally. And Sinek reminds us that it's okay to be a work in progress.
We're all a work in progress.
Always evolving, always learning.
It's about embracing those imperfections, both our own and those of the people we love.
And recognizing that true intimacy, it often happens in those messy, vulnerable spaces.
The spaces where we can be ourselves completely.
100%.
And I think what resonates most from this whole conversation is that we're not alone in any of this.
No, not at all.
We're all navigating this messy, beautiful, sometimes heartbreaking thing called life together.
And in a world that often feels so isolating, just knowing that can be incredibly powerful. So as you go about your day-to-day, think about this. How can you show up with more authenticity in your relationships?
How can you find those little ways to make a difference in the lives of others?
Even just that small act of kindness, that listening ear, it can mean the world to someone.
And remember, we don't have to have it all figured out. We're all learning, we're all growing, we're all in this together.
Beautifully said.
Go out there and be the change you want to see in the world.